Asking for a favor is more powerful than doing one. That sentence feels backward, yet it contains one of the most reliable strategies for turning an adversary into an ally. By the end of this, you'll understand the psychological mechanism that makes this work, why it's so effective, and exactly how to apply it. And chances are, your attempts to win people over are accidentally pushing them away because you're ignoring the one thing the human brain craves more than kindness: consistency. The story begins in the 1730s in the Pennsylvania colonial legislature. Benjamin Franklin, a rising figure, had a problem. A wealthy and educated rival legislator stood in his way. This man was influential, and his opposition was a constant obstacle to Franklin's political ambitions. Franklin noted that this rival would seize every opportunity to publicly oppose his motions. Direct confrontation would only create more conflict. Flattering him would seem desperate and insincere. So Franklin devised a different approach. He heard that this man owned a particularly rare and curious book in his personal library, a book Franklin himself was eager to read. So, he wrote a polite note, he acknowledged the rarity of the book, and asked if the gentleman would do him the great favor of letting him borrow it for a few days. The man, likely surprised, agreed. He sent the book over immediately. Franklin returned it about a week later with another note, this one expressing his gratitude for the generous favor. The next time they met in the legislature, the man approached Franklin and spoke to him directly, something he had never done before. He was remarkably civil, and from that day forward, he showed a readiness to assist Franklin on all occasions. They became great friends, and their friendship lasted until the man's death. Franklin had engineered a complete reversal of attitude with a single, small request. He turned an enemy into a lifelong supporter by asking for help. This seems impossible. It defies our normal logic of social exchange, where we assume giving something to someone is the way to earn their goodwill. But Franklin had stumbled upon a fundamental quirk in our mental wiring, a glitch in our operating system that forces us to justify our own actions, even if it means rewriting our own feelings. What happened inside that man's brain after he lent Franklin the book? The answer to that question reveals a tool you can use every single day. The mechanism at play is called cognitive dissonance. It was formally identified by psychologist Leon Festinger in the 1950s. The theory is simple. Our minds crave harmony between our beliefs and our actions. When the two are in conflict, it creates a state of mental discomfort, like an itch you can't scratch. Dissonance. To relieve this discomfort, something has to change. You can either change your action or you can change your belief. Think about the rival legislator's situation. He had two conflicting thoughts. Belief 1, I dislike Benjamin Franklin. He is my political opponent. Action 1, I just did him a favor. I lent him my rare, valuable book. This creates a painful inconsistency. The man's brain has a puzzle to solve. He can't undo the action. The book is already in Franklin's hands. The action is a fact, set in stone. So, to resolve the dissonance, the only variable left to change is the belief. His brain, operating below the level of conscious thought, starts a rationalization process. Why would I, a smart and discerning individual, do a favor for someone I dislike? The internal narrative has to shift. Perhaps Franklin isn't so bad after all. He showed respect for my library. He has good taste. Maybe my initial judgment of him was too harsh. Actually, lending him the book was the right thing to do for a learned colleague. The belief changes to match the action. The dislike softens into neutrality, then into warmth. The brain successfully resolves the dissonance, and the man feels better. He now has a consistent, harmonious view. Benjamin Franklin is a man worth helping. This is the path of least resistance for the brain. It's easier to edit a feeling than to admit your actions were illogical. By asking for a small, manageable favor, Franklin forced his rival's brain into a corner, where the simplest escape route was to decide it actually liked him. This process is so subtle and automatic that the person experiencing it feels like they simply had a change of heart. They believe their new, friendlier attitude is the result of their own rational deliberation, but what they really did was justify an action they had already taken. Understanding this gives you an incredible insight into human connection. It's often our actions that dictate our beliefs, not the other way around. But there's a deeper level to this. Why is asking for a favor so much more effective than offering one? When you offer someone an unsolicited favor, you risk creating a subtle power dynamic that can backfire. You are implicitly saying, I have resources, status, or abilities that you lack. Let me help you from my superior position. Even with the best intentions, it can feel condescending. It can create a sense of obligation, which many people find uncomfortable. The recipient might feel indebted, which can breed resentment instead of gratitude. They may even question your motives, wondering what you expect to get in return. The interaction frames them as needy and you as the provider. Asking for a favor does the complete opposite. It flips the script entirely. When you ask someone for help, you are sending a cascade of powerful positive signals. First, you're showing vulnerability. You are admitting you need something that they can provide. This is a sign of trust. It communicates that you don't see them as a threat, but as a collaborator. Second, you are conferring status upon them. You are positioning them as the expert, the one with the resources, the person of influence. You are effectively saying, you have something I value. Your knowledge, your possessions, your time are important. This makes the other person feel competent, respected, and magnanimous. People enjoy the feeling of being helpful. It confirms their self-image as a capable, generous person. Franklin's rival didn't just lend a book, he got to perform the role of a gracious patron of the arts and sciences. He got to feel benevolent. By asking for the favor, Franklin gave his rival a gift, the opportunity to see himself in a positive light. The man wasn't just doing Franklin a favor, he was doing a favor for his own ego. This is why the type of favor is so critical. The request has to be small enough that it's almost no inconvenience. A big request creates pressure and resentment. Asking to borrow a rare book is a low-cost, high-symbolism act. Asking to borrow a horse and carriage for a month is a major imposition. The ideal request is something that highlights the other person's unique knowledge, taste, or resources. Asking a colleague for their opinion on a difficult problem. Asking a neighbor who is an avid gardener for a small cutting from a plant you admire. Asking a friend known for their great taste in music for a playlist recommendation. These requests are flattering because they acknowledge the other person's expertise. They cost the person very little in time or resources, but they pay huge dividends in psychological goodwill. The key is to make them feel like a hero, not a servant. So we know this works on an individual level. But this simple mechanism is the foundation for some of the most powerful persuasion techniques ever discovered. This principle is the seed of a well-documented psychological strategy known as the foot in the door technique. It was famously demonstrated in a 1966 study by Jonathan Friedman and Stephen Fraser. Researchers went door to door in a residential neighborhood, posing as volunteer workers. They asked homeowners if they would be willing to display a small, 3-inch square sign in their window that read, "Be a safe driver." It was a tiny, reasonable request. Nearly everyone agreed. A few weeks later, a different volunteer returned to the same houses. This time, they came with a much larger request. They asked these homeowners if they would be willing to install a large, poorly lettered, "Drive carefully" sign on their front lawn. The sign was huge and ugly. It would obstruct their view and ruin the look of their property. To a separate control group of homeowners who had not been approached with the small sign first, only 17% agreed to this ridiculous request. But of the homeowners who had previously agreed to the small window sign, a staggering 76% said yes to the massive, ugly lawn sign. Why? Cognitive dissonance and the power of consistency. By agreeing to the small sign, the homeowners had performed an action that slightly altered their self-concept. I am the kind of person who cares about public safety. I support this cause. When the second, much larger request came, saying no would create dissonance. It would conflict with their newly established identity as a civic-minded citizen. To remain consistent with their previous action and the identity it created, they were far more likely to say yes to something they otherwise would have immediately rejected. Every small yes is a vote for an identity. The Benjamin Franklin effect is the first vote. It establishes a baseline of cooperation. Once a person has helped you once, even in a trivial way, they have a vested interest in continuing to see you as someone worth helping. Their brain has already done the work of justifying the initial favor. Each subsequent act of cooperation reinforces that justification. This is how relationships are built and how loyalties are formed. It's a slow, escalating process of mutual investment. The initial request is the key that turns the lock. But this powerful tool has a disturbing side. It can be used not just to build bridges, but to lay traps. This exact mechanism, escalating commitment from a small, harmless first step, is a core tactic used by manipulative individuals in high control groups. No cult leader ever starts by asking new recruits to hand over their life savings and abandon their families. That request would be met with immediate rejection. The process always begins with a small, reasonable ask. Would you like to come to a free dinner and lecture? Can you help us hand out some flyers for a good cause? Would you be willing to volunteer for just an hour this weekend? These are the foot-in-the-door requests. They are low cost and appeal to the person's desire to be open-minded, helpful, or part of a community. But each yes is a small act of commitment. Each one creates a tiny bit of cognitive dissonance that is resolved by thinking, these seem like good people. This is an interesting group. I am the kind of person who explores new ideas. With each subsequent, slightly larger request, the cost of saying no increases. Saying no would mean admitting that all your previous investments of time, energy, and emotion were a mistake. It would create a massive conflict with the identity that has been slowly built action by action. The brain's desire for consistency becomes a cage. The person rationalizes bigger and bigger sacrifices to avoid the psychological pain of admitting they were wrong. They start to defend the group to outsiders, further cementing their identity. By the time the truly life-altering requests are made, their entire sense of self is interwoven with the group. Saying no feels like self-annihilation. This is the Benjamin Franklin effect weaponized. It's a gradual erosion of personal boundaries, disguised as a series of small, voluntary choices. Understanding this isn't just about learning a social strategy. It's about developing an immunity. It's recognizing that the most dangerous traps are the ones we willingly walk into, one small step at a time. So what separates influence from manipulation? The line between the two is defined by a single word: intent. Franklin's intent was to build a bridge with a political rival to foster cooperation for the public good. He wanted to turn an antagonist into a productive colleague. The result was a genuine, lifelong friendship. His request for a book was an authentic gesture of respect for the man's intellect and library. There was no deception. The goal was connection. Manipulation, on the other hand, uses this psychological mechanism for exploitation. The intent is to extract value from the other person, their money, their labor, their loyalty, without regard for their well-being. The manipulator creates a false pretense of connection to serve a selfish agenda. The foot-in-the-door requests are designed to systematically lower a person's defenses until they are vulnerable to exploitation. The relationship is a means to an end. Using this principle ethically requires transparency and respect. When you ask for a small favor, your goal should be to open a door to a real relationship, to show trust, and to allow the other person to feel valued. You are initiating a cycle of positive reciprocity. Defending yourself against manipulation requires you to be aware of your own need for consistency. Learn to evaluate each request on its own merits, independent of what you've agreed to in the past. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to say no, even if it creates a feeling of inconsistency. Treating past decisions as sunk costs is a crucial mental skill. You are allowed to decide that the path you're on is no longer the right one, even if you took the first few steps willingly. The ultimate lesson from Benjamin Franklin's story is a profound one about identity. You think you act based on the kind of person you are. The psychological reality is closer to the reverse. You decide who you are based on how you act. Each action, no matter how small, is a vote cast for the type of person you are becoming. Lending a book, displaying a sign, helping a colleague. These are the ballots. The final tally is your character. The people you encounter every day are not just colleagues, rivals, or strangers. They are polling stations offering you a constant opportunity to define yourself, one small favor at a time.